Welcome back inside the den. Hey, we're continuing our position preview series for the Nevada football team. As we talked last time, Nevada just walked onto the field for their first practice at Wolfpack Park. So exciting times. We're moving on today to the wide receiver and tight end position. I'm joined by Chris Murray. We're going to do these mini episodes, just get you guys just a brief vocation on the Nevada football roster. So, Chris, how are you doing? And are you looking forward to these receivers and tight ends playing this year?
I mean, there aren't a lot of proven production at these two positions. So it'll be interesting to see who does emerge. I think you're going to see a lot of young players at wide receiver in particular. So, the days of having Romeo Doubs and Cole Turner and Elijah Cooks all on the same roster, 3 NFL guys, that's not this year. But there are some really talented young players, and they're going to get a chance to play just because of the lack of proven depth at wide receiver and then at tight end as well.
Yes. So we look at Nevada has a storied past with both those positions. You mentioned Romeo Doubs, Nate Burleson, just all, like you go down the line, Virgil Green at tight end, Cole Turner. Just you look around and it's like, it seems like, it's a good mill of receivers and tight ends that have run through Nevada. But obviously lately it's, under Ken Wilson, really under Ken Wilson. I mean, under Jay Norvell, that's where the receivers and tight ends flourished. But it's kind of stalled out. And obviously, as we mentioned before in your stories in the past, the receiver position is currently light, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the history of Nevada football, there's always been great wide receivers here. I mean, you go back to Trevor Inslee, who set the FBS record in receiving yards and receptions. You got Jeff Noisy, who is a Hall of Fame receiver, from the college level. Alex Van Dyke, who was a second-round draft pick. He's a Wolfpack Hall of Famer as well. You got Rashard Matthews during that 2010-2011 season. Brandon Wimberly. Zach Sudfeld is a tight end, made it to the NFL in the last 10 years. So there's usually been some really good pass catchers on the Wolfpack roster. Maybe not quite the case this year, but maybe there is one, and we just don't know about him yet.
Yeah. Some names we could throw out. Really just the younger guys right now. I mean, your Marshawn Browns, your Nate Burlesons, and then a couple transfers. Didn't we get one from who was it?
Charles Brown came
Brown.
from Texas State,
Yeah,
so he's
right.
someone who could potentially be in the mix.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because during spring camp, Nevada had Delvon Campbell here and Darian Wiley here, and both those guys after spring camp transferred to SEC schools. Campbell went to South Carolina, Wiley went to Vanderbilt. So those guys are going to be big players for you, and then whatever happened, maybe NIL money, they get lured away. So, Nevada already thin at wide receiver, then loses maybe 2 of its 3 starters at wide receiver, and they did have to backfill. They got a couple of players who had played at Montana State under Jeff Choate who had gone on to other schools. Charles Brown, kind of a smaller guy, didn't really do much last year, but the year before that had like 22 catches at Texas State. So, you look at the top 6 wide receivers on the depth chart as I see them, they got 42 combined catches at the FBS level. Nevada's returning receivers from last year, a combined 4 catches. So, yeah, there's just that's not what you want, right? You want proven productivity, but, Cortez Brahma Jr., I mean, that's somebody who, represented Nevada at media days. So, Braham, he might be able to step in there and be your number 1 wide receiver. I mean, that would probably be my guess at this point. Didn't do much at West Virginia, but was a really good junior college wide receiver. So, in spring camp, he looked pretty strong. He's probably going to be your number 1 guy. And then among the youngsters, I would probably say Marshawn Brown seems like he's the closest to being productive. He was really good in the spring game. That doesn't always, mean much because we've seen guys, shine in the spring game and then not do much during the season. But the bottom line is they need Marshawn Brown to play this year. And he's athletically, size-wise, and speed-wise, he's more than capable of being a really good Mountain West wide receiver. So it'll be fun to see how he develops, Bishop Minot guy. But, yeah, I mean, in terms of, positions where if you were grading all of them on Nevada's roster, the 2 that stand out as being lower graded would be defensive tackle and wide receiver.
Yeah. We should really name that spring standout, person as, a trophy, but under is it Victor Snow?
Yeah, Victor Snow had a couple of big games. Yeah. So he ended up transferring to Buffalo. But I think the difference is there's going to be playing time for these young wide receivers. There's just not enough depth on the roster to not play them. I mean, you need to play 5-6 wide receivers a game. And Nevada doesn't really have anyone that you would be this guy's going to get 85% of the snaps. He's earned it because he's shown before that he can be a high-level FBS player. So, people are going to get catches. That's going to happen. But, yeah, I mean, Nevada lost some it wasn't like a super talented group to start with, but, they lost a couple starters. Spencer Curtis transferred over to Hawaii. As we mentioned, Campbell, went over to Vanderbilt as well. So, it was a thin group. It got hit after spring camp, and they did their best they could to, fill that position.
So we said a Jeff Choate offense is 65% run, 35% pass. But he also wants, you said the vertical run, vertical pass. So you'd ideally, if you're building a receiver in a lab under Jeff Choate's offense, this person can block and get open down the field. Now, obviously, like, it's a lot to ask for out of a receiver. Be fast and be physical. But does anybody on the roster kind of embody a Jeff Choate receiver?
Well, I mean, I think Marshawn Brown can be that guy. He's just thin. I mean, when you're a redshirt freshman, you're not going to be fully developed. I mean, Nate Burleson's got a good frame, but he's really thin as well. So I think, this is a group that might be really good a couple years from now, but it's just going to take some time to develop. In terms of like the deep ball, when Nevada went deep last year, it was always a Delvon Campbell, right? And Brandon Lewis, I think the quarterback, has a pretty good deep ball. I thought he threw a number of really good deep balls last year. But that number one guy is gone from last year in terms of your vertical threat. The guy who's going to average 15 yards per catch. So if there's like the most uncertain position on the team, it's wide receiver. Like we'll see who emerges. I mean, someone's going to have like 40 to 45 catches. Like John Jackson, the third came, didn't really do much at USC and then came to Nevada, had about 40 to 45 catches. Now is in camp with the Chicago Bears. So, he's another guy Nevada had last year that they lost. But in terms of like playmaking, got to double this guy, wide receivers, even tight ends, which we're going to talk about as well. Nevada doesn't have that. Maybe I had it in Kaleki Latu, a tight end who was here during spring camp, showed some pretty good talent last year. But again, after spring camp, got lured away to go to Washington. So, arguably 3 of Nevada's top 4 pass catchers who they had in spring camp are now gone, which is not how you want to draw that up.
Yeah, Kaleki, to segue to tight end, Kaleki was supposed to be that guy. Kind of hurt that, his brother got all his exposure. Obviously, like him going the first round of the Colts, knowing their backstory. I feel like it put the spotlight on Kaleki when it probably wouldn't have otherwise. But I'm sure people saw that and like, oh, this guy has promise. His brother's really good. Let's go after this tall, lanky tight end who could be a legit passing threat. Unfortunate for Nevada that they lost out on Kaleki, but there's other guys that transferred over in the tight end room, and you think they play a part in the passing game, but realistically, you want some guy with the hand in the dirt and fill in those 11 and 12 personnel formations to really add in as an extra blocker. So tell us a bit about the holdovers in the tight end room.
Well, I mean, like in terms of holdovers, probably Jaden O'Rourke is maybe the most talented one. He's like a 6'7", 6'8" kid from Australia who did play a little bit as a true freshman, didn't have a lot of football experience. So the thought is he might be able to rapidly ascend. I mean, he's more of like a pass catcher than a run blocker at this point, but they did bring in a couple of transfers. A kid from Florida, Andrew Savei, who didn't take part in spring camp because he was injured, but he's 270 pounds. And then they got a guy from Dartmouth, Jace Henry, who's 268 pounds. So I think in this upcoming year, Nevada's tight ends are largely going to be like the 6th offensive lineman to help in the run game. And their main responsibility is going to be blocking. Jace Henry, in particular, the kid from Dartmouth, he played a little bit of quarterback as well. So he's a pretty athletic kid. Maybe he gets involved a little bit more in the passing game. But yeah, there isn't necessarily, someone that I would highlight as this guy's going to stretch the seam a lot and, be very dangerous in the pass game, which is fine. Like Virgil Green didn't do a lot of pass catching when he was at Nevada and, was a captain of that 2010 team and had a 10-year NFL career. He's currently the tight ends coach at Nevada. So, if your tight ends can really block and give you a big advantage there and secure the edge, then they can be very valuable pieces. And clearly, as you look at who Nevada brought in, they were getting bigger guys, more like run blocking kind of guys at the tight end position.
All right, Chris. So as we wrap this up, your receivers, tight ends, probably being more asked to block this year, but we'll see. Someone has to step up. There's a void at receiver and a void at tight end with Kaleki's absence. So, yeah, it's going to be new faces, but hopefully we'll see something rise out of those out of that void. So.
Yeah, I mean, Marshawn Brown is someone I think who could go put up like 40 catches and get 15 yards per reception.
Yeah,
I think he's got the ability to do that, certainly long term, and I think he could maybe do that this year. But in terms of guys who have to be, really good this year, you always look at the transfers. Like when you have 1 or 2 years of eligibility, you're bringing them in to make an impact in year 1 and year 2. So those 2 tight ends, and then Cortez Braham as well, I think is someone who's probably going to lead Nevada in receiving, and is going to have to be able to make some big plays, some contested catches, be a red zone target if Nevada's going to have a functioning pass game, which it really hasn't had the last couple of years.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be run first, but we'll get those shots downfield, whether it's Brendan Lewis or Chuba Purdy or AJ Bianca throwing it down there. All starts obviously on August 24th against SMU, but we'll continue, guys, our position preview in the coming days, talking offensive line, defensive line, all the way through the roster. We're getting you guys ready for the 2024 season. Tripping over my words, but it's the start of the fall camp, so knocking off some rust for myself. But Chris, any last thoughts here?
No, I mean, just like we said, Nevada's pass game has historically been pretty strong. I mean, even when they had really good rushing first teams, you have to be able to throw the ball. You can't be one-dimensional. So, Nevada's probably going to average, I think, in like an ideal world, more rushing yards than passing yards this season. But you do need to be able to throw the ball so they don't just put 8 people in the box and be like, okay, well, you can't throw it on us. Yeah, we're going to just sit here and, overwhelm your offensive line with these 8 guys in the box.
Well, we'll find out. Well, thanks guys for tuning in. I'm Jared Vasquez. That is Chris Murray. We'll see you guys next time on Inside the Den.